Chapter 18. A Challenge. Herschel, the messenger boy, went about his business, and Aidan found his brothers right where Herschel said he would. They were seated on logs around the cooking pit in front of their tent. Aidan was overjoyed to see them. "Brynnis! Maynard!" he shouted eagerly. "Jasper! Percy!" His brothers just stared at him. "You should see your faces," he continued. "Are you that surprised to see me? You should have known I'd figure out some way to get here." He began opening his bag. "I wouldn't let you have all the fun yourselves. Now, who wants some of Ebby's new cheese and Mariah's fresh bread?" Aiden was so busy talking and unwrapping that he didn't notice Brynnis and Maynard's surprised looks, narrowing into scowls. Even Jasper and Percy were frowning. Aiden went on, oblivious. "You have to tell me everything that has happened since you've been here. Father's doing better, I'm glad to say, but it was getting pretty—" "What are you doing here?" sneered Brynnis, cutting Aiden off in mid-sentence. "Don't you have some sheep to tend to?" "Or some Feechies to fight?" added Maynard. "Funny you should mention that," answered Aiden. "You wouldn't believe the day I had yesterday." "You shouldn't be here," shouted Brynnis, interrupting him. "You came to watch us all get killed. Why did Father let you come?" What did I do?" asked Aiden. There was hurt in his voice. "What did I say?" None of his brothers would answer him or even look at him. Aiden looked from one brother's face to the next, searching for any clue that would tell him what was going on. Then a trumpet blast split the air, followed by wild shouts. The sounds came from the west, the direction of the Perthan camp. Was it a raid? Was the battle beginning? Aiden looked to his brothers, expecting them to arm themselves and rush out to join the fray, but they didn't. Brynnis uttered a long sigh and cast his eyes heavenward. Percy held his head in his hands. He was covering his ears. Maynard and Jasper sat stone-faced, as if they had heard nothing. Surprised that his brothers seemed to have no intention of going anywhere, Aiden leaped to his feet. He motioned for his brothers to come along and ran in the direction of the shouts. He was already well on his way when he heard Percy's voice behind him. "Aiden, don't go there. It's not safe." Aiden ran to the edge of the valley that bordered the battle camp. On the opposite edge, in front of a great oak tree, stood a line of 30 or 40 men in black armor and black spiked helmets, Perthan foot soldiers bearing spears and blood-red shields. In the middle of the line stood the biggest man Aiden had ever seen. He looked to be 7 feet tall, maybe taller, and a huge plume on top of his helmet added another 2 feet to his height. The tallest of the other men barely came up to his chin. He looked like an oversized iron statue of a man. His right hand clutched a 12-foot spear. His left arm was strapped into a shield like a full moon, 4 feet in diameter, and decorated with images of the Perthan gods in their cruelty and hideousness. Over his left shoulder was a double blade of a massive battle axe. Its handle struck into a sheath strapped to his back. Even from across the valley, Aiden could see the cruel, murderous look in the great warrior's eyes. The Perthan's deep voice thundered across the valley. "Dogs of Cornwall! I am Grudal of Perth. Send a champion to face me in single combat in full view of our 2 armies. If he triumphs over me, the army of Perth will be defeated, and we will be your slaves. If I triumph, the Cornwalders will be defeated, and you will be slaves to us." The Perthan champions paused, pretending to be waiting for an answer from the sentries on the valley eastern edge. Receiving none, he spoke again. "You have nothing to lose. You are our slaves already. Every day you tremble at my threats. Every day you swallow my taunts without response. You show that you are slaves to Perth and servants to our gods. Through 2 phases of the moon I have stood each day on this hill and made you this offer. Why should your whole army be put to the sword? when the blood of one man would do. Is there not a single man among you, dogs of Cornwall? I am Grudal of Perth. Here I stand by the power of the Perthan gods. By their power I have broken men like twigs. By their power I have mown men down like autumn wheat. By whose power do you slink and cower? Can the god of Cornwall raise up a champion to face me? Who would spare the blood of his brothers? Grudals finished his speech and stood with arms outstretched in a gesture of mock welcome. Behind him, the Perthan soldiers waved and jeered and climbed around in the lower limbs of the oak tree like deranged monkeys. On the other side of the valley, the Cornwalders looked at their fingernails and drew in the dirt with their toes. They were too ashamed to look at each other, and they dared not look in the direction of the gigantic Perthan. Finally, they began to trickle back to their tents. Grydal threw back his head and laughed a loud, throaty laugh. The plume on the top of his helmet danced a derisive jig. The mere sight of him terrorized Aidan, even from across the valley. Now he saw why the Cornwalders were so demoralized. This was what had robbed them of their manly courage. Aidan walked back to his brother's tent. The seats where he had left them were now unoccupied. So Aidan opened the tent flap and peered in. There they sat, in the hot, stuffy dimness. No one was speaking. All eyes were fixed on the ground in sullen stares. Percy was the first to speak. For 2 weeks now, he has come each afternoon to the valley's edge and made the same offer. If we send a champion out to fight him man to man, we can avoid a battle between the armies. If Grydal wins, we become the slaves of Cornwall. If the Cornwalder champions win, the Perthan fighters become our slaves. So who's going forth and when? Asked Aidan. Let's see. Maybe Wilson Longshanks. He's not as big as Grydal, but he's the biggest soldier we've got. Or Leonard Stout. He can pick up a young bull. How about Wendell Quick? He's not big, but I'm sure he could dance circle around that lumbering oaf. Brennus interrupted. Listen, Aidan, dull-witted. Nobody's going out to face that monster. What do you mean? He stood right there and insulted our entire army, our king, and our god. What is anybody going to do about it? Brennus answered. Didn't you notice? He's 7 feet tall. His legs are like tree trunks. No, his arms are like tree trunks. His legs are they're like, he struggled for a comparison. Like bigger tree trunks? Offered Percy. Brennus glared at him. His legs are like pillars. His broad sword is as long as my spear. His spear is as long and as thick as a pine sapling. It would pierce his shield as if it were a sycamore leaf. But in his hands, it's like a reed. But surely he can't move very quickly, offered Aidan. He doesn't have to. His armor is iron. A normal man could hardly pick it up, yet he wears it as easily as I wear my tunic. He could take blow after blow and never feel a thing. Though no soldier has ever lived to strike him twice. They say he's killed 1,000 men. He's invincible. No, said Aidan, only the one god is invincible. Then perhaps the one god should meet him in the field, Brennus shot back. Brennus' irreverent remark hung in the air. No one quite knew how to answer the eldest brother. He seemed a little ashamed of himself. Aidan broke the silence. Let's assume, then, that we can't find a warrior to face a Perthan champion man to man. What would happen if we mounted an offense and fought the Perthan's army to army? We'd get slaughtered, answered Brennus. That's what would happen. They have us outnumbered 2 to 1. They have superior arms and armor, and they're hardened veterans. We're mostly farmers. We can't possibly defeat them. So we just sit here and wait until the Perthans are ready to destroy us? Aiden challenged. And in the meantime, we just receive insults and blasphemy from this monster every single day without giving him answer? Do King Dara and his generals have no better plan than this? Not so far as we know, answered Maynard gloomily. But at least we're not all dead. But isn't this a kind of death? Aiden's terror at the sight of Grydal had given way to indignation. He was ashamed at the cowardice of his brothers and countrymen. You die every day you hear that beast insult our armies, mock our king, and blaspheme the one God. You die every day you submit to a slavery that's been imposed on you without a fight. Brennus, sullen before, was growing red in the face. The Perthans haven't enslaved us. You're right, replied Aiden. We have enslaved ourselves. We weren't born slaves. We were born to serve only God and King. But look outside this tent. Look at Cornwalder's fighting men. Those aren't the faces of free men. They can't even meet the eyes of a stranger. Defeat and humiliation stare out from every face, and not one blow has been struck. We live under the protection of the one true God. Our enemies worship statues of fish and snakes, and yet we bow to their yoke without a fight. You don't want to be killed. I don't either. But wouldn't you rather die once than die every day of your life? Brennus leaned across, his face just inches from Aiden's. Then perhaps you should go have your one good death tomorrow afternoon when the giant comes back. Maybe I will, said Aiden. Shouldering his flour sack, he stood up to leave. Aiden, don't be stupid. It was Percy. You can't fight Grydal. Let him go, said Brennus. He can't help being stupid. And as for his fighting the giant, there's little danger of that. I doubt our brother, the shepherd boy, is braver than the entire Cornwalder army. Brennus glared at his youngest brother. Aiden shook his head, then lifted the tent flap. Without another word, he stepped into the slanting sunlight, not sure what to do next.